So we're back for another deep dive. This time looking at some really fascinating Champions League quarterfinal first legs that just wrapped up.
Yeah, we've got
Some real shockers in there.
some unexpected results. Definitely some big wins and some teams with a mountain to climb going into those second legs.
Exactly. And, specifically, we wanted to hone in on two matches in particular: Inter Milan's trip over to Bayern Munich and Arsenal's home game against Real Madrid. I mean, wow.
Big games, big results.
Yeah, some really significant score lines there. And we really want to dig beneath the surface, and see what we can learn from these games as we look ahead to the next round.
Yeah, because I think there's a lot more to it than just the final scores. There's a lot of tactical nuance and some really interesting individual performances that shaped those results.
Absolutely. So just to set the scene for our listeners, we're diving deep into these games today. We're really trying to extract those key moments, those turning points, the tactical decisions that the managers made, and maybe even unearth some surprising details that you might not have picked up on just watching the game, so that you can really understand not just what happened, but why it happened.
Yeah, and I think that's really key, to go beyond the surface level and actually get a deeper understanding of how these games unfolded, because that can give you a much richer appreciation for the sport itself.
Right. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. Starting in Munich with Inter against Bayern, Inter managed to pull off a pretty incredible win there, breaking Bayern's long unbeaten run at home in the Champions League. And it sounds like it was a really emotional victory for them too. What do you think that says about Inter's mindset going forward?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head there with the emotional aspect of it. To go to the Allianz Arena and defeat a team like Bayern Munich, who've been so dominant there for so long, it's got to be a huge boost for their confidence. I mean, it could really be a catalyst for them going into the rest of the competition.
Yeah, just a quick question there.
Yeah.
Do you think that this victory for Inter could actually, give them, a psychological edge going into that return leg?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just knowing that they've already beaten Bayern on their home turf.
Yeah.
That has to give them a belief that they can do it again. And on the flip side, it might sow a little bit of doubt in Bayern's minds. They're not invincible at home anymore.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a great point. Now, switching gears over to London, where we had Arsenal's 3-0 win over Real Madrid. I mean, that scoreline just jumps off the page.
It really does. It's a statement win, isn't it?
It is. It's a huge statement win, and against the reigning champions as well. So what really struck you about that game?
Well, I think the first thing that jumps out is just the dominance that Arsenal showed. Real Madrid, they've got all this experience. They've got this incredible history in the Champions League, but they just couldn't get a foothold in the game. Arsenal pressed them high. They were really aggressive in their challenges, and they didn't let Real Madrid settle into their usual rhythm.
So do you think that was more down to Arsenal's brilliance or Real Madrid's failings?
It's probably a bit of both, to be honest. I think Arsenal were clearly up for it. They played with a lot of intensity, and they executed their game plan perfectly. But at the same time, I think Real Madrid looked a little bit off to pace, maybe a little bit complacent, and they certainly weren't at their best.
Yeah, so it sounds like it was a really compelling tactical battle. And we're definitely going to delve into that in more detail a bit later on. Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty of each game, I do want to emphasize that we're not just going to focus on the results here. We really want to dig into those crucial moments, the tactical nuances, and really try to understand why these games unfolded the way they did, because I think that's where the real learning comes from.
Absolutely. Anyone can look at the scoreline and see who won and who lost, but it's understanding the how and the why that really separates the casual fan from the true aficionado.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's rewind back to that Inter-Bayern clash. Now, going into this one, a lot of the pre-match predictions were leaning towards a Bayern win, weren't they?
Yeah. I mean, you look at Bayern's home record in the Champions League, it's phenomenal. They very rarely lose at the Allianz Arena, so on paper, you'd think they'd be the clear favorites.
And Inter had their own injury concerns as well, didn't they?
They did. They were missing their first-choice wingbacks, Dumfries and DeMarco, which is a big blow because those two are such key players for them in terms of providing width and attacking threat.
Yeah, so all signs pointed to a comfortable Bayern victory, but as we know, that's not quite how it played out.
No, football's a funny old game, isn't it? Sometimes the form book goes out the window and it's all about who turns up on the day. In Inter, they definitely turned up.
Yeah, and it's a good reminder that statistics don't always tell the whole story. There's so much more to football than just numbers.
Absolutely. There's the psychological element, there's the tactical battles, there's individual moments of brilliance that can change the course of a game, and that's what makes it so unpredictable and so exciting.
Right. And speaking of tactical battles, Bayern's coach made a bit of a surprising selection in his starting 11, didn't he?
Yeah.
With Guerrero coming in for Musiala. What do you think was the thinking behind that?
Yeah, it was an interesting one because Guerrero is naturally a midfielder, but he's been playing at left back for Bayern recently. And with Musiala out injured, I think the coach wanted to maintain that defensive solidity on that flank.
So it was more of a defensive move then.
Yeah, I think so. I think the idea was to try and contain Inter's attacking threat down that side.
Yeah.
Because, Inter, they like to get their wingbacks forward, and they can be very dangerous when they do.
Right. And Guerrero's task was to specifically mark Calhanoglu, wasn't it? Inter's playmaker in midfield.
That's right. Yeah, Calhanoglu is a really key player for Inter. He's the one who dictates the tempo of their play, and he's got a great range of passing. So Bayern wanted to try and shut him down.
Yeah, and it seemed like Bayern were also really keen to implement their high-pressing game from the outset, weren't they?
Oh, absolutely. That's kind of their trademark, isn't it? They like to press high up the pitch, win the ball back quickly, and then hit teams on the counterattack. And it can be really effective when it works.
Yeah, but it also leaves them a little bit vulnerable at the back, doesn't it, if they don't win the ball back?
Yeah, that's the risk you take when you play with a high line and you press aggressively. If the opposition can play through that press, then they can be in on goal very quickly.
Yeah, so it sounds like there were a few tactical gambles from both sides in that first half.
Yeah, for sure. And it made for a really fascinating watch.
And it was certainly an entertaining first half, wasn't it, with chances at both ends.
Yeah.
One player who really caught the eye for Bayern was Olise. He was causing Inter all sorts of problems down that right flank, wasn't he?
Yeah, Elise was brilliant. He was really electric. He's got that raw pace and trickery that can just terrorize defenses. And he was putting in some really dangerous crosses as well.
And he even drew comparisons to some of Bayern's legendary wingers, didn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he's got that same sort of direct style as players like Ribery and Robben. He's always looking to run at defenders and take them on one-on-one. And he's got that ability to cut inside and shoot with his left foot as well.
Yeah, it sounds like he could be a real star for Bayern in the years to come if he keeps developing at this rate.
Yeah, he's definitely one to watch.
And Bayern had a glorious chance to take the lead in that first half, didn't they? When Pavard made that mistake and gifted Kane an open goal.
Oh, yeah, that was a huge moment in the game. Pavard just completely misjudged the flight of the ball, and it fell straight to Kane, who was unmarked 6 yards out.
You just don't expect a player of Kane's quality to miss those chances, do you?
No, you don't. But credit to Sommer in the integral. He made himself big and somehow managed to block the shot.
Yeah, that was a brilliant save. And it really felt like a turning point in the match because after that, Inter started to grow in confidence, and they eventually took the lead themselves.
Yeah, it was a really well-worked goal, too. They showed a lot of patience in their build-up. They moved the ball around nicely, and then Barella played this exquisite backheel flick to set up Bastoni, who then crossed for Lautaro to score.
Yeah, it was a beautiful team goal, and it really silenced the home crowd.
Yeah, the Allianz Arena went very quiet after that.
So with Inter leading 1-0 at halftime, how did they approach the second half? Did they try to sit back and protect their lead?
No, not at all. They actually started the second half really brightly, and they had a couple of chances to double their lead. They weren't content to just sit back and soak up the pressure. They wanted to go for the jugular.
And that must have been quite unnerving for Bayern, wasn't it, to see Inter coming at them like that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they're used to being the ones on the front foot dictating the tempo of the game. But Inter, they weren't afraid to take the game to Bayern, and they almost caught them out a couple of times on the counterattack.
Yeah, but as the half wore on, Bayern started to get back into the game, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. They started to put more pressure on Inter's defense, and they were creating more chances. And eventually, they got their equalizer when Muller pounced on a loose ball in the box.
Yeah, it was a scrappy goal, but they all count.
They do, and at that point, it felt like Bayern were going to go on and win the game. They had all the momentum, and Inter looked a little bit rattled.
But then Inter did what they do best, and they hit Bayern on the break and scored a dramatic winner.
Yeah, it was an incredible moment. Just when it looked like Bayern had turned the tide, Inter produced this lightning-quick counterattack, and Frattesi popped up with the winning goal.
And the celebrations were pretty emotional, weren't they?
Oh, yeah, you could see what it meant to the players and the fans. Frattesi dedicated the goal to his grandmother, who had recently passed away, and it was just a really touching moment.
So when you look back at that Inter-Bayern game, what are the key takeaways?
Well, I think first and foremost, it shows that Inter are a real force to be reckoned with. They've got a great blend of youth and experience. They're tactically astute, and they're not afraid to go toe-to-toe with the best teams in Europe. And then on the Bayern side, I think it's a reminder that even the best teams are vulnerable. They can be beaten if you can exploit their weaknesses and take your chances.
Absolutely. Now let's switch our focus to that other big upset, Arsenal's 3-0 demolition of Real Madrid. That's got to be a worrying sign for Real Madrid, hasn't it?
Yeah. It's a huge concern. They're the reigning champions. They've got this aura of invincibility about them, but they were completely outplayed by Arsenal. And to lose by 3 goals at home is a real blow.
Yeah, and what was particularly striking was that Real Madrid's star players, the likes of Vinicius and Mbappe, they were pretty much anonymous, weren't they?
Yeah, they were. Arsenal did a fantastic job of shutting them down. They pressed them high. They doubled up on them when they got the ball, and they just didn't give them any space to operate.
And Arsenal have got a pretty impressive defensive record against Real Madrid in recent times, haven't they?
They have, yeah. They've kept 4 clean sheets in a row against them in the Champions League, which is remarkable.
That's incredible. And with a result like that, the spotlight inevitably falls on the Real Madrid coach, Carlo Ancelotti. Is his job on the line now?
Well, there's definitely going to be a pressure on him now. He's got to find a way to turn things around in the second leg. But I think it's too early to say whether his job is on the line. I mean, he's won so much with Real Madrid, he deserves a bit of time to get things right.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now, the first half of that game was actually pretty even, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Both teams had their moments. Mbappe had a good chance early on that was well saved by Raya in the Arsenal goal, and Courtois made a couple of important saves at the other end.
So it was a bit of a cagey affair to begin with.
Yeah, I think both teams were just trying to feel each other out. They didn't want to make any early mistakes. And it wasn't until the second half that the game really opened up.
And it opened up in spectacular fashion, didn't it?
Yeah.
Declan Rice scored not 1, but 2 incredible free kicks.
Yeah, I mean, that was just pure magic from Rice. He's not really known for his free kicks, but he stepped up and delivered 2 absolute beauties.
And it's even more remarkable when you consider that those were the first 2 free kick goals of his entire career.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, what a time to get your first 2.
Yeah, talk about a moment of inspiration.
Yeah.
And to score 2 against Real Madrid in a Champions League quarterfinal. I mean, that's the stuff of dreams.
It is, and it completely changed the momentum of the match. Up until that point, Real Madrid were still in the game. But once Rice scored those 2 goals, you could just see the belief draining away from them.
And then Arsenal just rubbed salt into the wounds, didn't they, by scoring a 3rd goal through Marino?
Yeah, it was a really well-taken goal, too. Trossard did brilliantly to get to the byline and pull the ball back, and Marino was there to sweep it home.
That point was game over, wasn't it?
Yeah, pretty much. Real Madrid were completely shell-shocked, and they just couldn't find a way back into the game.
And then to make matters worse, they even had a player sent off in the closing stages, didn't they?
Yeah, Camavinga got a 2nd yellow card, and he'll miss the second leg now, which is a big blow for Real Madrid.
So looking ahead to that second leg at the Bernabeu, Real Madrid have got a mountain to climb, haven't they?
Yeah, they have. They need to score at least 3 goals without reply just to take the game to extra time. And against an Arsenal team that's playing with so much confidence and momentum, that's going to be a very difficult task.
Yeah, it's going to take a monumental effort from them. But as we know, Real Madrid have produced some incredible comebacks in the past, haven't they?
They have, yeah, particularly at the Bernabeu. That stadium can be a real cauldron of noise, and it can inspire the players to produce something special. But it's going to take something truly remarkable to overturn this deficit.
So what are your key takeaways from that Arsenal-Real Madrid game?
Well, I think for Arsenal, it's a real statement of intent. They've shown that they can compete with the best teams in Europe, and they've got the quality and the belief to go all the way in this competition. And for Real Madrid, it's a wake-up call. They can't afford to be complacent. They need to rediscover their spark, and they need to start performing consistently if they want to retain their Champions League crown.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we've seen 2 incredible games, 2 very different games, but both equally captivating. And they've really set the stage for what promises to be 2 thrilling second legs.
Yeah, I can't wait to see how they unfold.
Now, as we wrap up today's deep dive, I want to leave you with a question to ponder. Which of these comebacks, if either, do you think is more likely? And what were the most pivotal factors that led to these surprising results in the first place? It really makes you think about the power of momentum, individual brilliance, and tactical nous in these high-stakes Champions League encounters. So take some time to delve into the tactical nuances of these games and see what other insights you can uncover, because there's always more to learn, and that's what makes football so fascinating.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us for another deep dive. We'll be back soon with more insightful analysis of the beautiful game.
Until then.